Chapter 16. A Lesson in How to Overcome an Asthma Attack. A Celebrated Schoolteacher. When they had seated the old lady in the tiny consulting room, Buteyko asked her sternly, "Now, what must we do to get rid of an attack?" Mrs. Grekova was gulping for air through her mouth. She raised helpless, rheumy eyes at him, then was convulsed by coughing. "Miss Voronova, assist the patient, please," Buteyko suggested. Natalia started firmly straightening up the hunched patient. "Close your mouth, shoulders back. Further," she ordered. "Try to relax your stomach and to bring your breathing down. Breathe just a little. Don't suck in air like a pump. Just breathe a tiny bit." Natalia walked round the back of the old lady as she followed her instructions. With one deft movement of both hands, Natalia grasped the old lady's shaking abdomen with her strong, trained fingers and gripped the bottom of her heaving ribcage between thumb and index finger. "Reduce the depth of your breathing. Make each breath more shallow than the last. Breathe only through your nose. Relax. Relax your abdomen." Natalia sensed that the patient was beginning to follow her advice. Her abdomen loosened, and her diaphragm quivered perceptibly less. Shortly afterwards, Mrs. Grekova had greatly improved, and Dr Buteyko led her through to the special couch. "You've already learned pretty well how to get rid of attacks," he praised Natalia, who was perspiring from the effort. She carefully tucked a lock of hair under her starched hat. "Only," he paused, "don't get carried away holding on to the abdomen and ribcage. You can, of course, help the patient at some points, but they must do the work for themselves." Buteyko rose slightly from his chair. "We overcome an asthmatic attack and all the symptoms of asthma not by holding our breath, but by reducing the depth of it through relaxing the diaphragm." "Well, that's what I told her," Natalia Voronova responded, slightly put out. Her wide eyes expressed keen interest as they fixed the doctor steadily with feminine ambiguity. "But who is that woman? Why did the boys mention her today?" "Mrs. Grekova?" Buteyko again rolled back his left sleeve. "She's a special case. I'll tell you all about her." He briefly excused himself, went to the combine complexator, checked on the patient, gave the necessary instructions, and came back to his consulting room. "Mrs. Grekova is fatal, in the most literal sense of that word," he said, noticing faint surprise in Natalia's eyes. "She's one of those people who start by praising the method to the skies, then slag it off mercilessly as a result of their own sloppiness. She's an utter nightmare." Buteyko shuddered. "Mrs. Grekova first came to us the year before last. She was practically a stretcher case, panting for breath, twisted and wrinkled, like a 70-year-old woman, no less, when in fact she only recently turned 54. Buteyko again looked out of his room and said something to Kolya, who was standing nearby. "She was registered disabled at 52, with a full complement of complaints old women traditionally have: asthma, hypertension, angina, hemorrhoids, colitis, gastritis, and acute polyarthritis in her joints. Her hands were so clenched that sometimes she was unable to uncurl them herself. Well, we got rid of her attack and examined her using the combine complexator. The carbon dioxide level in her lungs was terrible, just 3.5%. She breathed in and out through her mouth like there was a gale in the room. We took down all her details and did a medical check-up. I started chatting to her," Dr Buteyko smiled tiredly, "and asked her why she thought she had asthma. Well, son," she spoke to me as though I was a child, "I was a primary school teacher and caught a dreadful cold, son, and that's how it all started." "And your heart trouble, the hypertension, the angina, how did they start, do you think?" As she listened to the doctor, Natalia rested her chin on her hand, covering her dimple with her second and third fingers. "Because my work was so stressful," she said. "What can you expect from a teacher?" "Very well," I said. "We've just got rid of your asthma attack. Let's you and I take a few little deep breaths and see how you feel." Buteyko fell silent for a second, listening to what was going on behind the curtain. She lasted less than a minute. Her cough came back straight away, and so did her suffocating spasms, and, as she put it, the blood hammered in her temples. Plus, she had sharp pains in her stomach, because she had colitis and gastritis too. I told her to breathe less deeply, and immediately everything came under control. "So," I said to her, "my dear Mrs. Grekova, remember now once and for all that all your woes come from breathing too deeply." Dr. Buteyko enunciated the last words with special emphasis. At first Mrs. Grekova rolled her eyes with surprise, but after I'd explained what was what and demonstrated how she needed to use the method if she was to get rid of the attacks herself, she seemed to grasp it. Buteyko raised a finger. She won an Order of Merit of the Russian Soviet Federated Socialist Republic as a school teacher, no less. Well, we've had some grief with this honoured personage. A tetchy grimace disfigured the doctor's chiselled features. God save us from another one. Since her, I've come to fear all teachers, directors, and others of that ilk, like the very devil. Natalia couldn't help but giggle into a fist. As I say, she grasped the method fairly fast, Buteyko recalled. Within a month, she'd got rid of virtually all her complaints. Her pause had risen from 4 to 37 seconds consistently, and sometimes it got to 40. And when it reached 40 and over, her polyarthritis lost its grip. Her hands began to uncurl. The colitis and gastritis stopped plaguing her. When her pause got to 25 seconds, she basically saw the tail end of her asthma. She even seemed younger to look at. Now it was inappropriate to call her an old woman. She was a normal woman of 45 years of age. Natalia detected real pride in Buteyko's voice. Just who is trying to keep this discovery from the public? Mrs. Grekova started raging. A pillar of the establishment in high dudgeon. If my relatives had not chanced to come into contact with a former patient of yours, I would be 6 feet under. She shook. She turned red. How many years have I trekked round hospitals? I'm registered disabled, and I'll contact every Communist Party committee. I'll write to First Party Secretary Khrushchev, she cries, and to the United Nations. I'll bring down every barrier to your method being recognized. There was a glimpse of real anguish in the doctor's darkening eyes. Recognized. Mrs. Grekova kept her word. She sent passionate letters to the Novosibirsk Regional Communist Party Committee, to the Communist Party Central Committee, to Khrushchev, and even to the UN. They said, while thousands of people are dying every day from incurable complaints, the medical establishment in our city has kept the most potent antidote under wraps. Punish those responsible. Invest in his method. She used to send me copies. Well, what's bad about that? Buteyko had become sad, and Natalia took his hand. Bad. Buteyko cautiously freed his hand, leaving his warmth in her palm. What is bad is that after this lady's letters I devised a rule for myself never completely to trust patients who immediately start lavishing praise on the method. Oh, don't get me wrong. The doctor flexed his shoulders. He was always careful about his posture. I'm not against active and triumphant supporters spreading the word about the diseases of deep breathing. I actually think we need more of them, and that most cured patients are selfish when they keep stum. Natalia nodded in understanding. But Mrs. Grekova, and she was only the first, was a vivid demonstration of the real price of attracting supporters who are too quick, too instantaneous. Do you know what she did? After a couple of months of feeling completely fine, she ditched all her exercises. She expressed her regret for this herself later. The doctor started examining the cardiogram that Kolya handed him round the door. Despite the fact we warn every patient 100 times over not to give up their exercises, despite the fact I warn them myself that if you're giving up your exercises, you're giving up on the method, and naturally it will give up on you. But deep breathing has made their thick heads dull, and only a few traces of the method stay with them. The pause is the only thing they remember, holding their nose. Dr. Buteyko took the lip of his finely chiselled nose between 2 fingers. They completely forget that the method does not consist of the pause, but in the gradual reduction of the depth of one's breathing. Not everyone forgets, of course, but teachers and film directors are particularly prone. Natalia noted a steely edge to the doctor's voice. Probably it's hard for them to learn anything because they're so used to teaching. So it was with Mrs. Grechova, and she later told me in tears that after 2 months she even stopped measuring her pause, let alone practicing the method. Buteyko saw from the cardiogram that the patient's health had deteriorated and put it to one side with a dissatisfied air. And I drummed this in during the renowned teacher's lessons. I told her that today she might have a 45-second pause and feel just great, but that in a week or two, if she didn't practice, it would be less than 30, but she would still feel okay. The dangerous thing is that when people give up practicing, they give up measuring their pause as well and assume that it's still 40 seconds because they feel all right. Natalia listened intently. During these open conversations, she picked up much useful information. But their pause has already plummeted to 20 and then gets worse, until finally, Buteyko shook the folded printout and thumped the desk with his fist, they cross into the danger zone. The quantity of carbon dioxide in their body goes down to a critical point. They suddenly collapse, and our patient, who last night was feeling tolerably well, is now gripped by a severe attack of the condition they no longer even thought about. And the first thought that comes into their mind is not, I am a backslider, who ditched my exercises and now I've been punished. Alas! The doctor had been on the point of rolling up the printout neatly, but suddenly threw it to the corner of his desk in irritation. Alas, the first thought that comes to their minds is, this means that the volitional elimination of deep breathing does not work for me. Do you follow me? The doctor grabbed Natalia by the flap of her open lab coat. They don't see themselves as lazy louts. They think the method was ineffective for them, and the fact that they had completely forgotten about it for weeks and couldn't even be bothered to measure their pause has gone straight out of their heads. That was the story with our old dear Mrs. Grechova. She threw in her classes and then one fine day was doubled up with an attack. Naturally, there was an ambulance, hospital, inpatient stay, good nurses popping pills into her mouth till she was ready to throw up, injections several times a day, and the old dear, who really did look like an old woman when her condition was acute, got worse and worse. She told me afterwards, I tried using the method when I was in hospital. I held my nose as best I could, but as soon as I let it go, a cough would stifle my breath and suffocate me. There's someone with an order of merit for you. Apart from holding her nose, not a modicum of theory remained with her. Buteyko wrung his graceful, sensitive fingers till they cracked. Although we drummed into her that it's not that you have to hold your breath, it's that you have to reduce the depth of your breathing. Holding your breath incorrectly just leads to overbreathing. The symptoms of your condition just get more acute. To everything there's a happy medium. And how did her hospital stay finish? Natalia wanted to hear the end of this edifying story. How could it finish? Dr. Buteyko unclasped his fingers. So far, pharmacology has not produced a cure for asthma, and it never will, he added with conviction. They do not know what really causes it, which is breathing too deeply. The old lady became deathly thin, and was on the point of dictating her will to her relatives. They were alarmed and said they were going to see Buteyko again. Mrs. Grechova rolled her eyes. Why, I saw him before. His method doesn't help me. Natalia was quiet. The doctor threw her an inquisitive glance. Would she get the point of what he was saying? The long and short of it was that they brought her in flat on her back. I immediately put her on the combined complexator. She hardly had any CO2 left. We introduced a bit more artificially, and she started to revive. I kept on chatting with her and asked, why do you have asthma? I got it after a cold, dearie. It often happens. And why do you have hypertension and angina? It's my nerves, doctor. It's my nerves. What can you do? Buteyko spread his hands bitterly. We started again. Gradually, with my assistance, the celebrated teacher recognized all her mistakes. Wild horses wouldn't make me stop practicing again, she assured me. This time she found it twice as hard and twice as long to master the method. Paradoxical as it might seem, that's the general rule. The method is twice as hard for people who have betrayed it. Behind the little curtain they could hear Mrs. Grechova's lamentations as she got up off the special couch. Her examination by the combined complexator had come to an end. Again we got her pause up to 35 seconds, and again she was off. Buteyko finished. Again, the letters to the district and regional party committees, Khrushchev and the UN, copied to me. I do my best. Dr Buteyko nearly took a deep breath with emotion. But when they brought her in half dead a third time, when she told me again that asthma comes from having a bad cold, my first instinct was to reach for a gun. Do you not believe me? He took Natalia by the elbow. I suggest you try for yourself. They went through into the laboratory and stopped next to the white-haired lady, who was quietly resting on a chair. Natalia straightened the crumpled collar of Mrs. Krikhova's dress and asked, "What do you think caused your asthma?" The teacher drew up her dry-veined feet beneath her and said, "Lovey, some time ago I caught a terrible cold in the rain." Buteyko shot out into the corridor, almost knocking over the next patient in the doorway. If he had known that 13 more meetings with Mrs. Krikhova were in store, he might have thrown himself out of the window.